This is part two. I'm continuing the New York Times piece by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, which was the inside story of what happened. And they interviewed over 1,000 people over a 2-year period to write this book called Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. This article is drawn from the reporting done for that book. Where we left off was J.D. Vance was giving options about what they could do to kind of fix the memo that they put out about how there's no client list. Option one was demand the release of the grand jury documents, which they figured they wouldn't release, and then they could blame the judges. We all knew they were doing that in real time. Option two was to have the Justice Department lawyers question Maxwell and publicly release the transcript, a twist on the idea proposed earlier by Vance. Blanche offered to interview Maxwell himself. I bet he did. What if we got her to talk to Congress? Vance suggested. Blanche raised the possibility that Maxwell's lawyer might expect something in return for her candor. Her candor? You mean lying? Just saying something nice? She also said she never saw Jeffrey Epstein do anything untoward. Warrington, the White House counsel, responded by laying out the available choices without advocating any of them. Maxwell could be given a pardon, he said, or she could have her sentence reduced. At that point, several around the table spoke up to register their strong disapproval. Pardoning Maxwell, a trafficker of young girls, would create a huge PR problem, Chung said, Jabba the Hutt. He predicted in the wake of the pardon, Epstein accusers would be fanning out on TV, telling their stories and ripping the administration to shreds. They will be anyway. Blair was also adamantly opposed to the pardon. We can't offer Ghislaine Maxwell anything, he said. A, I don't know why we would, and B, if we give Ghislaine Maxwell any sort of break whatsoever, and then she turns around and says nice things about us, or says nice things about us, and we give her a break, it will undermine the entire point of her saying good things. That will feed the conspiracy theory, period. If there's nothing for her to say that hurts us, we shouldn't have to offer her anything. Great point! The consensus was that calling for the release of the grand jury material was the best course of action. Wiles told the group she would discuss the matter with Trump and ask if he would send out a Truth Social post calling for the release of the sealed grand jury documents. Just then, the Wall Street Journal article that they've been trying to kill was published online. While they were in the Situation Room, cell phones are forbidden in the Situation Room, so a staff member brought in printed copies of the explosive report, which detailed how Trump and many others had created birthday cards and letters to be assembled by Maxwell into a special birthday book for Epstein in 2003. The birthday card attributed to Trump depicted the nude woman hand-drawn and inscribed with the image dialogue between the two men about a wonderful secret. The drawing was signed with what appeared to be Trump's distinctive jagged Sharpie signature in place of the woman's pubic hair. In days before the publication, Trump, in the effort to quash the story, had called News Corp's chief executive, Robert Thompson, News Corp's owner, Rupert Murdoch, and the journal's editor-in-chief, Emma Tucker, practically shouting. The president told Tucker, who is British, "Hate America." He told her he would file a lawsuit. But none of his bullying had worked, and now, as the group sat quietly reading the full story in the Situation Room, Wiles readied a public denial for the president, which he soon posted on social media. Shortly after this, the president posted again. He was going along with the plan his advisors had hashed out in the Situation Room, though it was clear he didn't like having to do it. Based on the ridiculous amount of publicity given to Jeffrey Epstein, I have asked Attorney General Van Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval. Now, this scam perpetuated by Democrats should end right now. In response to a request for comment, a White House spokesperson, Abigail Jackson, repeated Trump's claims that he was innocent in all Epstein-related matters, adding that by releasing thousands of pages of documents, cooperating with House Oversight Committee subpoena requests, signing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and calling for more investigations into Epstein's Democrat friends, President Trump has done more for Epstein's victims than anyone before him. At the start of the last summer, as far as outside observers could see, Trump appeared to be at the pinnacle of his power. He had just bombed nuclear sites in Iran, completed a blitz of executive orders to reshape the immigration system, and rammed through Congress his signature piece of domestic legislation, the big, beautiful pile of steaming dog shit. My name for it. He was using the levers of government to go after his enemies, and out of fear and desperation, America's corporate titans were falling all over themselves to genuflect. But behind the scenes, the Epstein crisis was paralyzing the Trump administration to a far greater extent than the public knew. In their public statement, Trump's advisors were full of bravado, dismissing the crisis. In reality, it was consuming the highest ranks of the administration, as no issue had for the president's team since the Russia investigation in his first term. His aides were determined to keep their rising sense of panic out of the public view. The DOJ had struggled with how to dispose of the Epstein matter since the beginning of Trump's second term. The issue was all-consuming for the president's political base, but also potentially compromising for the president himself in ways that officials in the new administration didn't fully understand. Any path forward would be fraught. Some of that complexity was self-inflicted. In the engine room of the MAGA movement, the Epstein files were potent fuel. Elon Musk had used his social media platform to repeatedly question why a client list had not been released. DJ Jr., Dumb, and J.D. Vance had invoked the Epstein files as a broader campaign message to argue that powerful people were hiding the truth from Americans. Tucker Carlson and the young conservative leader Charlie Kirk had each insisted that the government should release the documents, and each floated the idea that there was an expansive cover-up in progress. Trump himself had been cagey. On the Lex Friedman podcast in September of 2024, when asked about releasing the client list, Trump responded, "I'd certainly take a look at it," adding, "I'd have no problem with it. The list probably will be made public," he said, but he sounded less than enthusiastic. In private, Trump later told Representative MTG that a release of the Epstein material could hurt some of his friends. He repeatedly insisted that he did nothing wrong and the whole saga was fake news designed to hurt him politically. But his posture was overtaken by the growing frenzy among his supporters. Throughout 2024, Green had made it her mission to force the release of the files. And there were so many others. The far-right influencer Laura Loomer, the conservative activist Scott Presler, Chaya Raichik from Libs of TikTok. But when it came to propagating the Epstein files as evidence of a deep state capable of evil, two podcasters were not to be outdone: Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Patel, a National Security Council Director for Counterterrorism and Defense Department Chief of Staff in the first Trump admin, had repeatedly claimed in podcast interviews that the government was hiding Epstein's black book or client list, and he frequently asserted the FBI was deliberately withholding names to protect the powerful. Patel promised that a second Trump admin would release everything to restore public trust. On the Dan Bongino show, Bongino's background as a Secret Service agent had lent authority to his claims of a cover-up. What the hell are they hiding with Jeffrey Epstein? He'd ask his large audience of MAGA devotees. The release of the client list would rock the political world, he predicted. The Washington swamp was not telling you the truth. And so, as they took office in 2025, Trump's advisors were subject to intense pressures of their own making. Attorney General Pam Bondi quickly made things much worse. First, in a Fox News interview on February 21st, she appeared to confirm the existence of an Epstein client list, something the MAGA base had believed was sitting in the files hidden, and hinted that its release was imminent. Asked whether the DOJ might release the names, she responded, "It's sitting on my desk right now to review." But many viewed what came 6 days later as an even more egregious misstep. On February 27th, the White House Communications Office scheduled a lineup of cabinet officials to brief popular far-right influencers in the Roosevelt Room. The session began with VP Vance, followed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, walking the influencers through the administration's agenda. In attendance was a who's who of online MAGA: Mike Chernovich, Liz Wheeler, Colin Rugg, DC Drano. The president himself brought them to the Oval Office and gave them custom-designed challenge coins as a token of his appreciation. Before everything went wrong, one of them would remark, "It was the best day of my life." Okay, let's pause there. I will start part 3.